Thank you very much, Mr Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I represent Froome East Somerset, a fairly rural constituency. In February of this year, I conducted a survey asking residents in villages such as Lamiat, Dalting, Alhampton, West Pennard and Witham Friary about their experiences with mobile and broadband signal. The number of responses was overwhelming, and there was a striking consistency to what they told me. The current arrangements for getting mobile or broadband signal are mismatched, too expensive, frequently slow, and in many cases simply not fit for purpose. Access to reliable internet and mobile signal is now a basic necessity of our lives. Whether for work, education, healthcare, or simply staying connected, people rely on broadband and mobile coverage every single day. I heard from a number of brilliant rural businesses, wedding venues, farms, ironmongers, who battle with poor connectivity on a daily basis. For many, broadband remains one of the biggest obstacles they face as a business, both in terms of the quality and speed of the connection available to them and the frustrating experience it creates for their customers. One local farm, for example, was quoted over £250,000 by Openreach just to connect a wire across a relatively short distance in order to secure full fibre broadband. I certainly will, yeah.
Thank you, Member. We're all here for the same purpose. Our constituencies don't have the 3G broadband that we all wish to see. Does anybody agree that perhaps the opportunity should now come from Westminster here, from all the other regions of the United Kingdom, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, to collectively have a programme that delivers 3G broadband for everybody in this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Thank you very much for the intervention. I met with the Minister before, as I'm going to come on to, and I know there is a plan, and I have some specific questions about the plan that I'd like to come on to, but I totally agree this is a nationwide challenge. When it comes to mobile reception, I'm particularly concerned about the elderly and vulnerable in my constituency in relation to the government's digital switchover. Many of these individuals still rely on landlines, not by choice, but because mobile signal in their area is unreliable. Yes, certainly.
Thank you, Member, for giving me way. My constituency is in Wolverhampton West, which is a residential, densely populated and urban area. And a particular area, Tebnall, I have lots of elderly constituents, and they don't have a mobile signal at all, many of them creating a dead zone. A recent investigation by the Observer said that nationally, mobile coverage is over 1,000 times worse than reported by Ofcom. So does the honourable member agree that it is not solely a rural problem, but it's a national problem, it affects everyone, and it's something that the government needs to give urgent priority? Thank you.
Intervention, and I hadn't seen that research by the Observer, but it's interesting, and I myself live in a town in my constituency, but I have very poor mobile coverage where I actually live, and so I'm sure that's not uncommon to find that it's worse than is reported. So many older people in my constituency still rely on landlines, not by choice, but because mobile signal in their area is unreliable. While good internet and 4G can enable voice calls, this isn't always the case in rural areas. And crucial services like two-factor authentication for medical appointments or online banking still relies on SMS, which in turn relies on having basic mobile coverage. I have a constituent in Alhampton who tells me every time she needs a one-time passcode, she has to run out of her house and up the road to try and get signal.
On that point, the Honourable Member.
Yep.
Wendy Chamberlain.
I'm very grateful to Honourable Member Kevin Way. In my own constituency, North East Fife, half of the areas are considered to be the worst 10% in the UK to receive broadband coverage. And my community council raised just the issue you had in relation to updates, which is a problem for those who are home working and wanting to make payments online. I'm hoping the Minister will reassure me, but does she agree, a little bit like the Honourable Member does she agree that we need to be working on this on a nationwide basis so that we resolve these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank the honourable friend for the intervention. A couple of interesting points there around the fact that actually you can have a kind of relatively low number of people that are poorly affected, but actually they can be concentrated in one area, and that's quite often rural areas. And on the one-time passcode thing, I noticed that a lot of companies now are actually offering alternatives to one-time passcodes, but that seems to be quite a slow process. We often talk about 5G-ready smartphones and fibre optic broadband, but not all communities are starting from the same point. Urban areas have had a considerable head start, and rural areas shouldn't be punished for being harder to reach. Certainly, yeah.
Thank you. I'm grateful to my honourable friend. The challenge of connectivity is a huge issue in rural areas, and especially for businesses. I recently visited a local tourism business in Bacton who rely upon multiple copper landlines very vulnerable setup due to the upcoming switch off of the PTSN network. They've had outages and engineers unintentionally disconnecting those landlines during maintenance work, and no plan clearly yet from Openreach about full fibre in the village. Does she agree with me that connectivity issues like these are holding back our rural economy, and Openreach need to help villages like Bacton to thrive?
Thank the Honourable Friend for his intervention, and I absolutely agree that it holds back rural economies, and I'm sure there are some interesting statistics around how much more growth, which is obviously the government's agenda, we could be getting out of rural areas if they were actually able to connect at speed and at the times they need to, also without having to pay for expensive satellite alternatives quite often. I've really welcomed the Minister's continued engagement on this issue, and particularly for meeting with me and MPs in Somerset to discuss the next steps in the rollout of Project Gigabit. But I have 3 specific asks for him today. Firstly, I'd be grateful if the Minister could confirm when we'll receive the promised map identifying which households are included in the scheme. And for any who aren't included, what mechanism, obligation or incentive will exist to ensure that broadband providers still serve them?
Would the Honourable Member give way?
Absolutely, yeah.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Does the Honourable Member agree with me that it's unacceptable for homes and businesses originally put in scope for their local gigabit projects to be de-scoped part of the way through, like it could be the homes and farms in the Cowgrove estate on the National Trust? And then be told that the gigabit voucher scheme has been paused, and so they can't even buy into other projects that are going on in the area.
Yeah.
I thank my Honourable Friend for her intervention, and that does sound very unfortunate. I know in villages in my constituency we've had a problem where vouchers have been applied for and received, but actually it's taken so long to get internet coverage that the vouchers are expiring. So clearly a few voucher-related issues there. My second ask is that I'm concerned by reports from the telecoms industry that the remaining Project Gigabit fund, some £2 billion, might be at risk in the upcoming spending review. Any reduction in this funding would seriously undermine efforts to deliver universal full fibre connectivity. If such cuts were made, it's highly unlikely our more remote rural communities would ever see a fibre connection. So I'd ask the Minister, could he confirm whether this funding will be protected? And finally, as we continue the digital switchover, what specific support will the government provide to ensure that the elderly, the vulnerable and those in isolated rural areas are not left behind? Absolutely.
On the matter of the radio teleswitch service, in my constituency there are some 790 metres still working off this, and this work operates Economy 7. Across Wales there's 11,000 of these. But the government doesn't actually know how many households depend on these for their heating. In many of these areas, particularly rural areas, off-grid, without any signal, smart meters won't work. How are we going to ensure that these often very vulnerable people are actually kept safe in future?
It's an extremely good point, and one that perhaps the Minister would be able to address in his response. In today's hyper-connected world, no community should be included. We speak of self-driving cars and space tourism. Clearly, the technology exists. It's not a question of possibility, but of political will. And at this point,
give way.
Yes, absolutely.
Does the Honourable Member agree with me that rurality does not necessarily conflate with population density? Because my constituency of Chichester is a city, albeit a small one, and yet the mobile signal in the city centre is non-existent, and businesses have had real issues attaching to any sort of broadband availability.
Thank my honourable friend for her intervention. I absolutely do agree, and actually in Frome, when I moved into my house recently, I was told that I wouldn't be able to get broadband with only one provider was available because all the other cabinets were full. So there's lots of issues around broadband connectivity in towns as well. I was actually just going to finish my points there because I believe colleagues have agreed to speak, so I'll stop there. Thank you very much.